Imagine two authors standing at opposite ends of the literary universe, both armed with the same weapon: nonsense. But one uses it the way a child uses a balloon, joyfully, experimentally, letting it float wherever it pleases. The other uses it the way a surgeon uses a scalpel, precise, merciless, and aimed directly at the hypocrisies of the age. Lewis Carroll and Jonathan Swift share a toolkit, but not a philosophy. If they ever met, they would agree on the rules of language only long enough to break them in completely incompatible ways. Lewis Carroll, the mathematician who wanted words to misbehave. When you step into Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, you're not merely entering a fantasy world. You're entering the imagination of a logician who has decided, for once in his life, to let the furniture rearrange itself. Carroll isn't rejecting meaning. He's showing you that meaning has cousins: sound, rhythm, playfulness, and they deserve custody of the language for the weekend. Consider Jabberwocky. The opening stanza is pure lexical mischief. "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe." Every word is counterfeit, yet the poem feels strangely legitimate. The grammar is intact, the cadence unmistakable. Carroll is performing a linguistic magic trick. He removes sense and still leaves you with understanding. This is nonsense operating at a high intellectual frequency. Carroll isn't anti-logic. He's hyper-logical, so rigorous that he loops back around into delightful absurdity. And when Alice accuses the Mad Hatter of speaking nonsense, and he tells her she simply lacks practice, Carroll is inviting us into the joke. Nonsense isn't a failure of communication. It's an alternative mode of it. Carroll bends reality not to escape seriousness, but to show that seriousness is optional. His nonsense is a vacation from reason hosted by reason itself. Jonathan Swift, the satirist who makes logic dangerous. If Carroll uses nonsense to liberate, Swift uses it to prosecute. Swift doesn't distort the world to amuse you. He distorts it so you can no longer ignore the grotesqueries already present in it. His absurdity is not whimsical. It's diagnostic. In Gulliver's Travels, the war over which end of an egg to crack is comic on the surface, but Swift immediately endows it with a grim statistic. 11,000 persons have died rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. At that moment, the laughter catches in your throat. Swift isn't inventing absurdity. He's revealing it, thinly disguised. The Lilliputians are not ridiculous because they're small. They're ridiculous because they behave exactly like us. And then there's a modest proposal, where Swift does something extraordinary. He uses impeccable logic to arrive at a morally unthinkable conclusion. His proposal to solve famine by eating children is not written like a satire. It's written like a policy paper. That is the point. Swift's genius lies in weaponizing rationality itself. He shows that if society's values are corrupt, then reason will dutifully produce corrupt solutions. Where Carroll gives us nonsense that elevates imagination, Swift gives us nonsense that interrogates conscience. The two poles of absurdity. So what does it mean that these two writers use similar techniques but arrive at such different emotional destinations? It means that nonsense is not a genre. It's a vector. Its meaning is determined by the direction it's pointed. Carroll points nonsense upward, toward possibility, creativity, the elasticity of thought. Swift points nonsense inward, toward the uncomfortable truths we'd prefer not to face. Carroll invites you to imagine the impossible because it's delightful. Swift forces you to imagine it because your world is often just as irrational and far less charming. Both dismantle the sensible world, but one does so to show that imagination can thrive without rules, while the other does so to show that society often thrives despite breaking them. If Carroll is the patron saint of playful madness, Swift is the high priest of moral indictment. Why these two matter together. Reading Carroll after Swift, or Swift after Carroll, reveals something important about literature's relationship with absurdity. The same techniques can produce opposite effects depending on the author's moral purpose. Carroll uses nonsense to expand the mind. Swift uses it to sharpen it. Carroll reminds us that language is flexible. Swift reminds us that humans are not as reasonable as we pretend to be. Carroll's world says, "Let's play with logic until it dissolves." Swift's world says, "Let's follow logic until it incriminates us." Both are masters of the impossible, but their impossibilities serve different truths. The final contrast. Lewis Carroll turns nonsense into an art of wonder. Jonathan Swift turns it into an instrument of critique. Carroll gives us a universe where rules happily malfunction. Swift gives us a universe where rules function perfectly, and that's the problem. One frees you, one confronts you. And literature is richer because both insisted on breaking reality in their own very different ways. If you want more deep dives into the ideas that shape literature and the literature that shapes us, consider subscribing. There are more journeys inside the pages ahead.